This relates to planting up pots with bulbs ready for colour for next spring. Of course, when we're gardeners, we're always planning ahead, and really we're not always thinking about the season that we're in as much as we should do, but we are planning ahead for future seasons. And of course, here we are now, September, October time, and we've got to think about getting our pots ready for colour for March, April and May. Pots of beautiful bulbs which will take us right the way through those spring months, ready till we put all our summer plants in again. There I am, you see, thinking about summer already. So I'm going to simply show you what you can do to create some interesting planting combinations to give you quite a long season of colour actually. Now the important thing when you're doing bulbs is to choose your container, and here at East Ruston we always like to use lovely old terracotta pots, purely because they fit in with the style of the garden, you know, the style of the brickwork. And I think it's quite nice that when you choose your container it fits in with maybe your style of house or the hard landscaping materials that you are using. So old terracotta is lovely, and of course it does age beautifully. And something like this pot, which is about what, 14 inches or so in height and 12 inches across, it's going to cost you about sort of between 10 and 15 pounds. So, you know, not bad money for something which is handmade and beautiful. So I'll put that to one side for the moment, because we need to think about the bulbs that we're going to put in. And here I've got some hyacinths, Hyacinth Festival Blue. And I'm going to use these in my pots, purely because they start flowering relatively early, towards the end of February if the season's warm, but March and April are the main times for bulbs. And in this packet here I've got tulips, and this is a variety called Princess Irene, and I've picked this from our store of bulbs here ready for the vicarage because it's such a lovely colour. It's wonderful rich oranges with sort of burnt umbers of red and sort of bronze in it. It really is a beautiful tulip, and I think that will go really well with blue hyacinths. You could use dark purples, you could use yellows, will go quite well, sort of keep it along those sunny colours. And there's some good lemon yellow hyacinths, but I like to go for quite contrasting colours, and it sort of reflects really with what Alan's ordered in his bulb collection. Now, if you're getting bulbs from the garden centre, you really need to look at what you're buying. And as you can see here, look, these are lovely plump bulbs. Lovely, healthy. You can see where the roots have started to dry off on the bottom. They've got a good solid base plate. That's really important. You can see on here, it's even starting to throw out some little bulbils at the side. But something like this from your garden centre could cost you anything from 50p to £1 a bulb, depending on what variety of hyacinth you are buying, and whether, you know, the bulb varies in size, because there are different sizes available, and I would always spend as much as you can on the plumpest bulb. Now be a bit careful with hyacinths, because some people can get an allergic reaction to them, and sometimes it can bring your fingers out and your hands out in a bit of a sort of itchy rash. For me it's not an issue, but you will find that when you are sourcing them or buying them, that your garden centre will have those little plastic disposable gloves available just in case. But plump healthy bulbs, that's really good. And the same with the tulips. Lovely, lovely tulips here, look at them. Aren't they just wonderful? And what amazes me about bulbs is that these contain everything that we need. There are the roots in here, there are the leaves, there are the flowers, all contained in this one little package. Absolutely brilliant. And once again with your tulips, you want to make sure that they are nice firm bulbs. You know, if you get them in bags which are pre-packed, you know, give the bulbs a little squeeze and make sure they've not gone soft in any way. If they have gone soft, it's probably not advisable to get them, because they may be starting to rot very slightly. Very rarely that happens, but it can be a problem. Now in terms of our layering up, we've got a good drainage hole in the bottom, as you can see through the bottom here. We just need to obviously add some sort of material to it to stop all the compost getting washed away. Now, there are two thoughts. Some people don't bother about putting anything in, but I like to put some old crocks in the bottom. And old crocks, just some old pots here. These are some of the old East Ruston pots that have been broken up, so I'm going to use them in the bottom. Come and have a look. You see? So we're going to put a layer, I'll add more to that. We're just going to put a layer of crocks in, about 1 inch or so. But you could use old polystyrene, which is brilliant. You know, if you get a lot of packaging, if you buy lots of stuff off various internet sites, then you'll get sort of, you know, lots of packaging come through. So that's very good. Aggregate, if you've got gravel or you're clearing some beds in the garden and you get old stones. There's a bit of old rubbish in here as well. We'll put all that in. That'll be fine. Anything just to act as some extra drainage because the bulbs don't want to sit sodden wet through the winter. And of course, we'll be planting these up throughout September, October into November, and they'll be sitting there slowly rooting, but they won't put any shoots on really until the following year, until the light levels start to increase again. But there we are, drainage in, push that over there. Okay, so that's ready to go. And then of course we need compost. And here I've just got, we use nursery stock compost here, but this is equivalent to what you would buy, which is a multi-purpose compost from the garden centre or nursery, or the DIY store, wherever you're getting it from. Now, of course, you can use bulb fibre. There are specialist mixes, but I would say if you're going to use bulbs in the house, things like paper white narcissi, or you're going to be possibly using some prepared hyacinths for Christmas, then you could use a bulb fibre. And all it is, it's a coarse open structure which is very low in nutrients, because bulbs don't really need a lot of sustenance. They've got everything within the package, as I've said. But a multi-purpose compost is adequate. And in here, there's a bit of slow release in as well, which comes in the mix, but that will be fine. So I'm going to add about 5 to 6 inches in there. So I've filled up to here on the pot, okay, so that's sort of level. I'm going to firm that down a little bit, okay, firm that down, so that's our finished level. And on this layer I'm going to plant my bulbs, which are going to flower later. And out of these 2 lots of bulbs, it's going to be the tulips, which will flower a bit later. So we've got our compost in our pot ready, and I've moved it down on the ground here just to make it easier to work with, because if you've got the height of your pot and the height of a bench, you can end up sort of having to work high up like that. But down on the floor here, it's easier to deal with. And of course, as I've said, we're going to put our bulbs in lower down, which are going to flower later. And here I've got the tulips, okay? So as you can see with these tulips, I'm going to be quite generous with them. Now, obviously, you know, economics will come into it, but I always think it's better to have a few less pots but have them looking really spectacular than to have lots of pots that haven't got enough bulbs in. And I would like to see the surface of this pot covered with flowers and foliage right the way through the spring. And I'm going to just work out how many I need in here, and I'll sort of tell you as we go. And it really just does come down to, for me, is what looks right. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, can't leave it at that, lucky number, 14, I think we'll put one more in there, 15. Okay, so there's 15 tulips in there, and I think that's a good number for this pot. And you can see they're probably only maybe 1 centimetre, 2 centimetres apart in places, what's that, half an inch. But, you know, you can be quite generous with the way you put them in. Now, in terms of the depth of bulbs, as a standard rule, it's 3 times the depth of the bulb. So if this is our tulip bulb, it wants to go in, so that's the soil level, and then 2, and then 3, so it'd be about that far down. So if you look at how this is going to end up, I've gone for a level which is about 3 times the depth of the bulb. Okay, but if your tulip's going a bit deeper, it doesn't matter. Okay, the bulb will always push its shoot right up and come through the compost and put its roots down. And often bulbs actually find their own levels. They will often pull themselves down deeper into the soil if they're not deep enough, and move themselves out if they're too deep. So don't worry, they're very clever things. You really wouldn't think you'd got all that sort of plant technology in one place. And then we're going to add some more compost. So get some more compost in. I'm going to layer up. And you haven't got to just use tulips and hyacinths. I mean, this sort of bulb lasagna, as it's sometimes called, you could use dwarf narcissi, things like tate. You could use crocus, which are also very good. I love the dwarf reticulata iris, you know, things like harmony and George, which are good sort of inky blues and rich purples. You know, the possibilities really are endless, you know, and mix your colours up, try whatever you like. To be honest, as long as you follow these sort of basic tips, you really can't go wrong, because let's face it, after a long cold winter, any spring colour is just so welcome in the garden. So a bit more compost on top there, firm that down. Then we're going to go for our hyacinths. I've got this lovely blue, and once again I'm going to try and be quite generous with them. Space these about, what's that, inch, 2.5 centimetres apart. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I mean, that's a good number in there, 7, to be quite honest, because they will produce quite a bit of foliage and quite fat flowers. So that will fill up this pot quite nicely. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7 on there will be adequate. You'll see the way I sort of just gently push them into the compost. Don't want to push them right in so we get hard compost underneath, but I like to nestle them in quite nicely. And for hyacinths, 2 times the depth of those bulbs is adequate, and you'll see by the time I've ended up there, that will be about right. So I'm going to put some more on here and just firm that in a bit as well. And we'll put it a little bit up. I like to leave a lip. I like to leave a watering lip, but what will happen anyway is that as we water, the sort of weight of the water sort of percolating through the compost will draw it down, and we'll fill in all those nooks and crannies and those crevices, and then we should hopefully end up with a good at least 1 inch, 2.5, which is 2.5 to 3 centimetres of space at the top for watering. And there we are, job done. So all we've got to do with this now is give it a good water to make sure the moisture gets all the way through. Remember, 1 inch of water percolates through 9 inches, so we give a good couple of waterings to filter through. And this can quite happily go out and stand somewhere possibly out of the way if we don't want it in the garden for the time being, or it can quite easily just go out into its flowering point on the terrace or the balcony, wherever it might be. And if you really want to jazz it up, you can top it with some violas or some winter flowering pansies just to take you right the way through the winter months. And next spring, it'll be a wonderful mix of those wonderful blue hyacinths, and it should overlap, hopefully, with the Princess Irene with that orange, and it'll be a really cracking combination.
Say when. When?
When? Oh. Sure. You mean say, start saying? Oh.
You said say when, so I said when.
I say when. Hi, I'm Roofe.